Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by my guest Keith Banwaite from Tappter. How are you doing, Keith?
Very well, David. Thanks for having me today.
It's our pleasure, and it's exciting to talk to you because I think the way that we communicate with our clients is immensely important, and we're being forced as agents to understand that we should be offering convenience to our clients in terms of the messaging platforms that we use to communicate with them. But as a business owner, that would probably send my hairs on edge, and I'm all worried about people abusing messaging platforms because it's not always secure and it's not always correct. You guys luckily have a solution for that. So let's just talk about it. How did you first come up with the idea and concept for Tappter?
Yeah, so interestingly, it had nothing to do with messaging when in its first inception. I was working for Vodafone at the time, getting annoyed with having to manage lots of personal information with exchanging business cards and things. So just started having ideas about whether there was a better way to do things. And I guess the first manifestation of the idea was around a digital ID concept where each individual would have control of their personal information and all of the content within their profile, and they could then share that with different businesses, but using a single profile, so that if any of that information needed to be changed, they could just update it once, and then that would synchronize through all of the different businesses that were connected to them. And the problem at that point was all around data decay. So a lot of businesses are obviously investing money to acquire customer contacts, but that data goes out of date. So having a mechanism to keep that data up to date is quite powerful, and that was where it started from. But actually, in talking to lots of different types of businesses of different sizes and in different sectors, we started to realize that the underlying requirement was about communication and messaging. They just wanted to be in contact with these people and making sure that they had a way to be in touch should there be any services or stuff that they wanted to communicate to them. So that's where it started to form into what we see today as the proposition. And now messaging is very much front and central of the proposition, supported by the digital ID features, which are still relevant, but of course, but the messaging takes the lead role.
Because we've all got the ability to sort of message. We've all got, some people use WhatsApp and they'll use WhatsApp for business, or they think they do in terms of the way that they deploy it. We have to be careful though in terms of compliance and handling data, documents, ID. There's so much that goes on that you cannot afford to just have it floating around, and it needs to be more secure. So how does this then differ from WhatsApp in terms of the functionality?
Sure. So a big difference is the compliance piece to this. So it's fully GDPR compliant on a consent basis. So a business cannot communicate with a client unless they have issued a notification asking for permission to do that, at which point, should that customer agree, then communications can start to happen. So as I say, it's a consent-based GDPR approach, and that applies to the personal information of that individual as well. The business will not see any of that content unless the individual has consented to that. So that's the first part. The second part is around, I think, more onboarding, but the regulatory requirements that estate agents definitely have, mortgage brokers, solicitors, and the like, where they are required to capture ID verifications. And also typically have terms of engagement letters or some kind of contractual commitment that customers need to sign. So in our application, that's all built into the workflow. So it's super simple for the customer to handle those steps within one application. And of course, once they've, say, for example, validated their ID once, that customer can share that result with multiple businesses. So they're not having to copy or send multiple copies of their documents across email to different businesses just in one place. So that's the first part, is around compliance. And then the second part really is around how we enable businesses to structure their communication. So it's built on the concept of having channels similar to, say, Slack or Microsoft Teams, where you can create different channels for different teams, different departments. So that can all be possible. So there's a much greater level of configurability that a business can have. And then there's other smaller features with regards to showing customers who specifically they're talking to. So on WhatsApp, you just see that you're messaging a business, but you don't necessarily know who in the business. And on that application, one of the features, if you like, that is quite different is that a single customer can be talking to multiple business entities through a single chat. So it's like a group chat, but you might have an estate agent, a solicitor, and a mortgage broker or whatever, all in one chat. But the customer can clearly see which individuals are in that chat and also which businesses they're from as well, so that there's never that confusion. So these are just some of the ways. I'm just touching on it. There's more to it, but I'm conscious.
There is so much more to it, but I must tell you, I'm going to confess now in terms of I'm a bit of a sales progression geek. So I know that you not necessarily imagine this exclusively for the property world, but when you and I first spoke about this, lights went off in my head, and I was just sort of going, right, well, this could be used for sales progression. This can be used for keeping, communication tight between different parties, solicitors, exchanging documents, all the sort of nitty gritty that we have to do. And nobody wants to be bothered by a phone call these days. So if we can get somebody to do it where there's visibility as well, part of it sometimes is demonstrating to your client that you're chasing the solicitor. Sometimes it's about letting the solicitor know that the client needs to do something. And in an environment where you can securely let both of them know, without sort of going through lengthy email chains and backtracking and dropping somebody off, I actually think this has many practical applications across the property industry, not just in sales progression, but instantly the sales progressor in me went, this is brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And you're kind of building the picture out for people now, which is great. I mean, that's part of it really. And I'd love to say that these ideas have all come through Tappter and manifested in the proposition through us, but the reality is, just through talking to customers, as I say, of different sizes, different sectors, we started to get a sense of what everybody was trying to achieve, and there are some commonalities in that. And specifically, like you said, in the sales progression side, we see real power in this, and we're getting that feedback a lot now about that ability to keep these groups included in the loop. But like you say, it's demonstrating proactivity as well, because I imagine for an estate agent these days, the concept of being able to differentiate themselves against their competition when they're trying to win business becomes quite important. Well, how do you do that if it's not just about fees?
Yeah.
Like typically estate agents are very personable, charming salespeople. So as a customer, I've been on the receiving end of it. You kind of left scratching your head sometimes. Well, who do I go with? You don't often know. So we see that Tappter can bring something to the agents as a way of demonstrating some differentiation that they do, and also demonstrating their proactivity once they're obviously in that sales progression cycle of how they actually go about managing the process.
So if you are a prospective customer and I'm stood in your living room desperately trying to make you love me as much as possible and being as personable as possible, I can obviously add this kind of functionality to say, look, that this is great today, but going forward, there's going to be a lot of nitty gritty that we need to get through, and where we roll our sleeves up. We use a platform that allows us to deliver that seamlessly and securely. I can obviously see how I would sell that to you as a customer in terms of my service offering. It has clear benefits to the customer, and I always think the bits of prop tech that work the best is where it's the end user, the end customer that actually wins, not necessarily the agent every time, but it helps the agent to do what they do, but it delivers demonstrable value for those people that are looking to buy, sell, or rent their properties. So I think that it has obvious applications with that. But my question to you would be, as agents over the years, when websites were little more than a sort of a digital business card, it got drummed into us that we should just make sure that all our communication and is pushed towards the website, and we got into that sort of method of communicating. Send us an email, click on the website. We need to sort of come away from that and that's obviously going to take a shift in behavior. Why would agents sort of embrace a third party, or why should they embrace that third party application?
Yeah, you're raising a really interesting point here, because one of the things that we were unsure of was how receptive businesses would be, especially the larger ones, about channeling communications through a third party application such as ours. And interestingly, because when we talk about this with customers, we are very clear on our vision, in that, from the get-go, even when we were looking at things from a digital ID point of view, it was all about the consumer benefit. It was about making lives stuff simpler for the end customer in how they go about interfacing with all of these businesses in whatever transactions they're doing. So we've had that consumer piece front and center of our minds, and when we explain that to the businesses, actually that's been well received, because I think that they are starting to change their mindsets around this, and that's been really encouraging for us to see that. Because like you say, historically, we've had a sense that perhaps they don't want to let go of it. But now, with the emergence of different technologies and different ways of doing things, and also recognizing that really a key differentiator is how they think about the customer and how they place the customer front and center as part of their thinking and planning is quite important. So in that sense, it's been really well received, some of the ideas we've been communicating on this. But having said that, we have an approach that allows businesses, should they want to embed, I guess you could call them widgets, on their own websites or mobile app that will allow them to use the Tappter chat functionality, but through their own front end applications, should they want to do that. But what we do say to customers is that if you do want to do that, great, but just give yourself the opportunity at some point in time, should you want to turn those chats on in the Tappter app as well. Because, as we see this growing, again, keeping in our minds that the convenience for the end customer is an important point, having the ability to turn those chats on in the Tappter app, where that customer can then not only chat with that specific business, but lots of other businesses. It's obviously in everybody's interest to bring that kind of vision to life, should there be the chance to do that,
And let's face it, most of us these days, we make sometimes that unconscious decision to send a message or to chat with somebody rather than pick up the phone to them. Not necessarily because we've become unsociable, but it takes time, and you need to be in the right mental space in order to have that conversation. And I know, particularly when you're communicating with customers, sometimes you need to be absolutely on the ball and to know exactly what you wish to communicate to them. And a 5-minute chat becomes a 15-minute chat, becomes a half an hour chat. And before you know it, it's eaten up so much of your time and theirs that perhaps could have been cut down to just a couple of minutes when you're forced to sort of summarize things succinctly. I mean, I'm the worst for that, because I'll talk for Britain. But I think when I'm forced to message somebody, I get down to the bottom line, and I think it's just a much more effective method of communication. Do you think there's therefore that hope that email and phone has probably given over a great deal of space to simple chat?
I mean, if you look at the evidence that in our personal lives, we all use chat, right? That's what happens these days. And like you say, so much so, I think just part of the etiquette now is you would often message before you call someone. Say, are you free to call? Because you don't want to kind of infringe on their lives if they're busy, but you know that dropping a quick text to check is the thing, and is how it's done these days. So I think that in our personal lives, we're so used to messaging. And reports suggest that actually consumers generally would rather message a business. 60% of consumers, at least, would rather message a business. And I'm sure that number will increase as messaging becomes more of a mainstay as part of business operations. So I think that, sitting and doing nothing, if you like, and just relying on the email and phone methods, it's not broken, right? But I think that you look back before even email was introduced, it wasn't necessarily broken then, but email was a shift forwards, and that's what we see with messaging as being the next major shift forwards in terms of communications that businesses would, communication styles that businesses would adopt. So we would always say, of course, you might say we would say this, but we would genuinely feel and see that the consumers want this type of approach, and we would encourage more and more businesses to kind of consider bringing it on. to satisfy that need. But like you say, the ability to quickly ping a message and then wait for responses in your own time is also hugely beneficial for all concerned as well. So there's a real practical edge to this.
Keith, you're talking to somebody who's just about old enough to remember the days when estate agencies thrived on the fax machine was that center of the office. And I remember ours used to sort of bob from side to side as something came in, but we used it for everything, to communicate with solicitors in terms of sending them sales memos. We would, if anything urgent needed to go, we would use this ancient machine to basically copy those documents and send it across. And when we think about it, if you would have said to me back then, look, David, there's going to be a day where solicitors won't insist anymore that you send in communication on fax or whatever it is, I wouldn't have believed you. But look at where we are today with email and online document signing. We've never really looked back, have we?
No, that's right. And you know, as I say, we definitely see that bringing a powerful messaging solution that really considers the end consumer need, as we said, that's where we've started from. But of course, in talking to many businesses, we have understood in depthly what they need, and that whole ability to combine the compliance with the communications, structuring it in the right way so that different teams can message different customers when they need to. You know, it's not just sales progression, but lettings, managing maintenance issues with lettings properties, especially where third-party businesses are involved in some of that issue resolution process. You know, having all of that in one space becomes really powerful. So yeah, we see it very much as the next move. And I think the other thing to add from our side is that, you know, when we were building sort of the nuances of the solution, in the back of our mind, integration was a key point, right? Because okay, small businesses may not have invested so heavily in tech to this point, but certainly medium to large ones will have. They might probably have a CRM of some kind, maybe some marketing tools. So it's very important for Tappter to be able to seamlessly fit into that kind of workflow process without causing too much hassle. You know, this becomes just a medium to filter your communications, and it can connect into those different systems as and when is necessary.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because it's key. It's what I call, you know, suppliers playing well with others in the same playground. But it's absolutely true. One of the bugbears of estate agents in days gone by was that we were just stacking up our tech. They'd all sit alongside each other, but they weren't really sort of talking to each other. So I would have to flip from window to window, system to system. Very often there's so many inaccuracies that creep in if you're not able to allow that communication. So it's great and very reassuring that you guys are committed to sort of working with other suppliers to try and make Tappter fit in and work well with whatever system an agent's using.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think what became apparent was obviously CRMs have become quite useful and powerful, but they do require daily investment into the data. So, you know, people are having to sit typing in data into the systems to keep them relevant and up to date. There are links that kind of allow you to pull in emails and things into the system, so that it's kind of become more of an automated process. But you know, the way that data is kind of brought across in that fashion becomes quite limited just because of the way that email works. With our application, you know, you've got the concept of messages flowing about, but you've also got the notion of this digital ID, if you like, going back to some of my earlier points, where a customer's profile would contain relevant information about where they live, contact details, as well as right to rent, right to work, some of this. So that stuff can be synchronized also through to the CRM, so that should any of that change, and the CRM gets automatically updated, because sometimes people do need to change that stuff. And again, that's bringing the convenience to the consumer, but recognizing the benefit to the business of keeping their systems up to date with the relevant information, so that they can act accordingly and trigger whatever process they need to do as part of their operation.
That's superb. It really, I've had a little bit of a preview to it, and it looks great. And functionality wise, I can see how you would deploy this. There's an obvious use for it, obviously, on that sales progression. There's an obvious use for it as well with property management and maintenance and all that sort of stuff. However, mostly I can also see it being a better level of customer service when you're onboarding a client. And all that time where you're having to sort of gather information from them, rather than the client getting several sort of different emails saying, now can we have this, and can you sign that, and can we see this? You can keep it all sort of in one place, and the ability to sort of invite third parties in, such as solicitors, becomes important. That sharing of those ID documents, and the fact that, you know, they don't need to go and spend 2 or 3 weeks gathering all the stuff that you gathered in an hour at the beginning of the client journey. So I think it probably will add convenience to the client. They won't have to communicate so many different things so many different times during the sales process. And I think that's very often what tends to happen. There's an awful amount of duplication, and there is this sort of reticence sometimes from professional partners to rely on the information provided by others, but where they can clearly see it being given by the client in a secure environment, to me that's priceless, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. And you know, you're making a really good point with regards to what we would call a single point of contact, especially when you consider a customer's entire digital journey, right? With the creation of all of this modern technology, which has been fantastic, that has led to challenges with regards to how you consistently manage or provide a customer experience across all of those different channels. So even big retailers that we've spoken to have been looking at this and asking questions about, okay, can this be used as a single touch point across the digital journey that we have? Because that's a nightmare to manage, right? And especially like you're saying in property, given that there are those different parties, it has that capacity to give that single entry point, super simple, everything's in one place. And it's also a visual tool that we're also so used to in our personal lives, given that we do use a messaging kind of platform. We've very much kind of modeled our main chat interface on, you know, the mainstream chat applications, just because everybody's used to it and it's so intuitive. But what it does give you is that visual interface that helps you make sense of who's saying what and who you're sending information to. I often find myself anyway on emails, you lose track of who's this guy, and especially like being introduced to a mortgage broker, whether that's, you know, if you're a large estate agent, you have your internal brokers, or whether it's external, you kind of lose track of who's who.
I'm probably showing my age now, or lack of tech ability, but I'll be honest with you, my email is too clever by half. It automatically groups messages together based on the subject line, and I cannot tell you how many times I will have people that don't belong in the same email flow just because they happen to write the subject my house or whatever it may be. It's so ubiquitous in our industry that it's going to come up, and there is confusion, and sometimes it can be difficult with on email to sort of pick out the last response and where we're up to, whereas with chat, all I know is that last message at the bottom there is the most recent one, and if I want to, I can, you know, for argument's sake, it's something we've all got used to with WhatsApp groups. You just click on the media and you know that the documents have been exchanged there, they're all there, all the photos, all the videos, and all that sort of stuff. So to be able to do that on a professional, almost controlled setting, to me has absolute value. So earlier, I think at the beginning of our discussion, I probably touched on security, if you like, or the worries and the anxieties that business owners have when their staff are using a messaging app. Now, generally speaking, most of us, because we use messaging apps in our personal life, you can become relaxed in terms of your tone of voice, the type of thing that you would say to a customer, or the type of message that you send across. Abbreviations are very common, and sometimes if you're not careful, you can get that tone of voice wrong. The other thing that sort of bothers me, and I suppose is and this can happen in any business, but you might have a rogue member of staff or a member of staff that's leaving, and if they're using the messaging on their own app and on their own phone, then they're going to leave with all that client data. That's number one. But number two, you know, you don't have that resource you can't simply say, oh, James, give me your phone. I want to see what you said to Mrs. Blogs 2 months ago. You can't do that anymore. So I think there is that level of anxiety around letting people run wild with messaging. Hopefully your solution answers that.
Yeah, absolutely, you know, and you're dead right in what you're saying. It is going to be a consideration for businesses, because if they get that wrong, it can be so damaging for reputation, and reputation these days, given that you have social media, word can quickly get around about any negative experience. It's so important that businesses have a level of control over those elements. So yeah, with Tappter, from a business continuity perspective, because everything's managed under a business account profile, if you like, and then you have your multiple channels within that you then add your team members to as you need to, all of the communications are visible and managed under that business account. So should people leave, or should people be on holiday, other members of staff or colleagues can be picking up those messages or see the full history there. It doesn't kind of go with the person when they leave. So that's one part. There's a business continuity aspect to it. The other part is it's a separate system from your personal account. So, you know, rather than firing some banter across to a customer by accident, you know, you're protecting yourself by having it in a very business specific application environments to avoid or mitigate that risk at least. So there's that part to it as well. And then just, yeah, like you say, tone of voice. You know, I think that brand values become so important in this day and age. There's so many reports about, you know, Generation Z looking to want to feel more connected to organizations that they you know get services from. So that those brand values, tone of voice, it all links into kind of creating that feeling that a customer will have about that business. And tone of voice becomes more observable, shall we say, within the Tappter structure. So management can dip in and out of messages as and when is required, just to ensure that their staff are kind of using the right kind of tone of voice, representing the brand in the right way, and can intervene very quickly if necessary, should they see any issues that come up. So from that point of view, because people sometimes ask me, you know, is this an application for marketing or sales or whatever? It's actually cross-functional, but it also has such a powerful impact from a leadership point of view as well for these sorts of reasons.
Yeah, and visibility is key to sort of maintaining that level of customer service, and that not only the continuity, but I suppose consistency throughout your different channels, but also throughout your different departments. Content writers will tell you tone of voice is everything. And in messaging, if you're going to use messaging for convenience, fantastic, but do not forget that tone of voice. And I think that's all important what you've said. So yeah, that's really useful.
In a way, it's almost self-policing, because you know, I think people are aware that IT departments might be able to dip into your emails or whatever, but it's not a commonly done thing. Whereas with a messaging application like ours, it's just normal that people would be picking up and seeing messages that you're sending to clients, as well as you seeing theirs. And so you know, there's that self-policing element where before you're writing a message, you're not only thinking, all right, what is the customer going to think about this, but you're also going to be thinking, what are my colleagues going to be thinking about this? So you may say it adds a little bit of pressure, but you know, it's probably in a good way.
I can live with that. I can live with that. It's probably healthy pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
It is exciting to sort of welcome you to the property world. All your details can be found on kerfuffle.com. In terms of agents onboarding with you and starting to use your system, what's your process like?
Yeah, so we would suggest that people get in touch either using, I think you've got the Calendly link, so we can set up a demo through that, or just via the website by setting up a demo. We can give you a run through of what the system does. Better still, we can invite you onto the Tappter application as one of our potential customers or leads. So you can get the experience that your customers will get when you're inviting them onto the application. So that gives you first-hand usage of the app yourselves to really understand that customer journey. And then from there, if it's something that you want to go with, you know, we would work closely with you and advise you on what the most appropriate channel structure would look like for your business. we've had the benefit now, as I say, we've spoken to so many businesses, we have a good idea of how things should be set up and structured to kind of have a really efficient way of managing things. So we will put these ideas forward, get you set up, and then it's away you go. I mean, we've purposely designed this to be super simple and intuitive, so it's nothing too extraneous in terms of onboarding, but they would be the simple steps, and then away you go. And of course, should you need any support while things are in motion, then we'll always be happy to lend a hand when appropriate.
Fantastic. Keith, thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, David. Thanks a lot.